Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it to. I hope, like me, you're doing it with a little smile on your face as you rock and roll through the Blitz universe. I'm loving life at the moment, having a lot of fun. I've met a heap of really cool people of late, been to some fantastic places, have had a great time playing Blitz, and been part of some really cool things that the community's been putting together. Most notably Skate Extreme's charity stream and also the patrons and all that kind of thing. And I've had a great time. And a couple of people keep asking on the YouTube's comment section, and just to show that I do actually read them, for a review of this tank here, or rather a second look at the Ru251. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be having a look at what is best described as, well, it's not a bad tank. It's actually quite a good tank, and I've been playing it on my new contributor account, and you can see here I'm playing it on my actual Bushka account, which is why it's in the dress blues, that lovely camo that I do so favour. It isn't, however, the pushover, easy peasy lemon squeezy drive that the T54 lightweight sometimes feels like. And that's because, despite the fact that the 54 lightweight has a lot of stuff going for it, but it's just insane, and it shouldn't have. Like, for instance, it has a very, very similar horsepower to weight ratio to this tank, despite the fact that this tank has absolutely no armor and the 54 lightweight manages to have some armor, and it's got very, very similar ground resistance stats. In fact, slightly inferior in all forms of terrain ground resistance stats to the T54 lightweight. Like, go figure, because the lightweight's so much lighter armored than this tank. I mean, it's not. It shouldn't have those kind of skills. But what it doesn't have that the RU does have is that insane 80 kilometer an hour top speed. So while the RU is a lighter tank than the lightweight and has less armor than the lightweight and has a slightly better edge in horsepower per ton, it doesn't have a hugely noticeable acceleration advantage. It does seem to have a little bit of an acceleration advantage, but not hugely noticeable. What it has that the lightweight doesn't have is the ability to click over to that 80 kilometer an hour mark. And it's a very fast tank. And it also has something called high explosive plastic, which is your HE round. Not your high explosive anti-tank, but your high explosive plastic shell. And because of that, it's uniquely equipped to deal with other tanks that have really, really poor armor profiles, specifically other light tanks, much like the T49, whoopsie daisy, much like the T49 has crap armor but has high explosive, which makes it absolutely devastating to tanks like the Ru251, or basically anyone that it can penetrate. The RU has the same kind of deal with its high explosive shells. And I've got to say, before we go any further, I do run this tank with the extra calibration on your shells so you get more penetration numbers, because I do like to run it and use that HE. You can see I've got HE loaded here because there's a couple of light tanks I'm going to be coming up against if they pop here. We get a lovely shot in there on that T71 and then manage to drive up the hill and somehow turning derp shot there from the T49. Another big HE shell into the 71 and finish him off with a final one. Now, why am I using HE shells there? The difference is in the damage. Your standard AP rounds will do 225. Your high explosive anti-tanks will do 190, which isn't particularly fantastic, but your high explosive rounds of themselves, the little Hesh kind of shells, will do 270. And if you really want to maximize the tank, you have to start firing that stuff. It's got a hell of a lot going for it. The other part of the playstyle that really calls to me with regard to this tank is it's so mobile, its traverse numbers are so lovely, it floats across the ground, and if you can get it running at 80 kilometers an hour downhill and start turning through, no one's going to be able to track you with their gun. It's just crazy, crazy fast. Your traverse numbers, again, I'm running all the bells and whistles on this variant, is 73.72 degrees. That's with your rations and everything. You can get it up to over 73 degrees. So you can imagine it's hell on earth for non-turreted TDs. And you're going to see a lot of me running around behind non-turreted TDs in this video and just ruining their day. You really can get behind them very quickly. The biggest problem you're going to have with this thing is if you get behind them, you've got to make sure you slow down because you'll go so quick, sometimes you'll slide all the way back around to their gun. And you can see I'm using HE again to hit the soft spots here on the AT-15 and doing really, really solid damage on it, even though I'm low rolling on that. And then I kind of fluff it here, which is not the HE's fault. That's Bushka's fault for refusing to zoom in and aim. Because, you know, Bushka loves a good no-scope, which has been the source of much consternation. And we do use the HE there to pretty good effect. You'll see when I get round the back of this Tiger P, I do actually slow down and then I drive forward, and as his gun reaches me, I pull back and then drive forward again. Now, you've seen this move a few times probably in videos if you've been watching me for a while, but it's exceptionally effective at all tiers against all players. If it just means you get to sit for a little bit and not take damage for a little bit longer, you get faster reload, you lower their effective DPM, you raise your effective DPM, that's all good. And you've got to be willing to take advantage of really quick fire opportunities because the tank can. Now, I'm going to do a video on the 54 lightweight as well, just to outline how it's been affected by changes and how it's still very, very strong. I don't know that it's hugely stronger than this tank anymore, and that's a weird thing I'll talk about when I get to talk about that tank. But I did find I was extremely successful driving this. Again, I've switched to high explosive and I get a horrible roll here, which is pretty rubbish. But you can see 270s, 290 odd for the first one, and then I don't know where that went. I honest to God don't know how that landed behind him while it was fully auto-aim zoomed on the actual tank, but there you go. Like all light tanks, it has light tank camo. That means your camo while going 80 kilometers an hour is exactly the same as your camo when completely stationary like this. I wish I had $1 for every time I said that because I would have a whole lot of money. And like a light tank, like, you know, the common denominator for light tanks, your speed and your camouflage make you ideal for capping. And it allows you to be really, really cheeky and be very, very aggressive. You can see here what I'm going to talk. I'm going to get right up to that 80 kilometers an hour here. We accelerate very, very quickly going downhill, kick over right towards your 70, high 70s, and then turn back up the hill. And like 20 seconds after being there and running out the other direction, we're going to come back around here again and just keep rolling and not stop. That IS-8, by the way, IS-8s, because I've done a lot of videos on IS-8s, I know they've got terrible gun depression, which means that I'm able to cause him to jink and move, get shots in, and then roll down underneath him and engage this Ru251 without worrying about that IS-8 hitting me, because he's never going to get down here. He's just not going to be able to get the gun down. You can see there he's struggling, and we're just going to finish off this Ru251 with high explosive again. Like, pack a lot of that HE. You need to pack a lot of that HE. It's really, really effective. It's a good tank. It's still a good tank. It works very well. It still has very, very specific things that it's good at and very, very specific things that it's really bad at. And the longer you drive this tank, the more in tune you'll become with tanks that you really need to worry about, like that ISU-152 that is next to me. I mean, this poor old Ru251 thinks he's getting away, but unfortunately for him, Bushka again refusing to go to the zoom. I just love a no-scope. Big fan of the no-scope. And then you carry through with that speed. You see how I don't stop here? I'm going to turn around this hill and I'm going to hug it really, really close so the guys behind me don't get a chance to put shots in the butt of this tank, because it obviously has no armor and it can take a huge and big numbers if you get hit from big HE shells from ISU-152s. Even 120mm tanks like the IS-6 and such can put HE shells into you at times, and you want to minimize the opportunity of that. You're basically driving it like a bat out of hell. Now, when I first did a video of this tank, I called it Drive It Like You Stole It. And I still very much, you've seen throughout this video, I very much hold true to that drive it like you stole it mentality. There's a T-49 around here somewhere. I can't see him. If he's not here, and this other light tank, the other T-49, has pushed up really aggressively as he goes sliding around there. I'm going to give him a hand, and we're going to try and clear this medium very, very quickly. We drop the adrenaline. I don't want to go too far over the top of that in case there is another tank around behind me. But we are doing a double team on this, and then the 49 just gets too aggressive and loses his bananas and goes just so deep into enemy territory. There is no return from that. There is really no return for that. We take one look, we think, yeah, maybe not. We're just going to bail. Their 49 throws a quick one our way, and we're hugging that corner super tight, and we evade it. Then we keep the terrain between us and him. We look at the map. We see there's a Borsig down there. We've only counted 4 tanks up top, including the one we killed. It's a T-34. There's someone in cap. We're missing 2 TDs. So what we're going to do is move down here and engage this T-34, try and help this Borsig out because he's in all kinds of strife. Realise we're still loading HE there, which is not a good idea. And we're going to look for the AT and the Jagdpanther 2. In all these videos, I'm not spending a whole lot of time stationary. It is bad business for you to stay still if you're spotted or if there are other tanks in the general vicinity. What you need to be doing is using your mobility. Your greatest asset is your mobility. Now, your DPM numbers are really good too compared to the T-54 lightweight. You definitely are the king of the hill. Again, poor old TD with me behind him. 2347 is your maxed out DPM on the lightweight running the rammer. 2763 is your DPM on this thing running the rammer. Of course, I don't run the rammer, I run the calibrated shells. But just so you know, those are the numbers. So, in summation, use your HE, use your speed, use the camo, reset camo all the time, play the light bulb game, I've talked about it before, and you can do well in this tank. Is it an easy tank to drive? Not at all. And if you're a newer player, don't go relying on this thing to carry. It takes a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, both of the maps, the tanks you're facing, and the kind of players that you're playing against to be successful. It's not the kind of tank you want to be grinding up as an initial line if you haven't had a lot of experience with the game. It's still a very good tank, but it's a good tank for 3 reasons. It's a light tank, it's super fast, and it's got that high explosive plastic shell, the HE shell, that actually has a whole big bunch of penetration. Namely, you can pen 107 millimeters of armor with the 90 millimeter Rheinmetall, as opposed to, say, the 50 millimeters of armor you can pen with the T-54 lightweight's 100 millimeter. So make sure that you know what you're doing. If you're not good enough for the tank, you won't succeed with it, and it'll just frustrate you, and it'll kill your win rate, and you won't do a whole lot, because there's a lot of tankers out there, myself included, who when we see these things, we load the HE and we look for the opportunity to use it. And if you give yourself up coming out sideways, or you do something silly, you'll be absolutely punished for it, and deservedly so, because it's a finesse machine. It's a beautiful machine. It sounds lovely when it's going, but you've got to look for shots like this. You've got to look for chances to really get stuck in, and you've got to read the map to be able to do that, because if you don't, all that's going to happen is you end up doing not very much for your team and having not much fun in the process. And you can see throughout this, I very, very rarely expose myself to enemy fire until either the game is completely done, and there you go again, high explosive onto the engine deck of an IS-3 Defender, switching back to AP, and then trying to get around in front of him. Look at the mobility on this tank. I mean, it really does make life tough. It makes him work really hard to get that one shot in, and I would have got around in front of him again if that bloody other IS-3 hadn't got in the way. Just a lovely tank. Lovely tank if you're good enough for it. I'm Bushka on Blitz. I love you guys. Thank you so much for your continued support. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're a patron, you should be listening to the podcast every week. There is a patron-only podcast. I put one up today. One went up last Monday. There's a bunch of them that have been over time. And there'll be a patron-only video going up tomorrow or Wednesday. So get on board. I'm Bushka on Blitz. Love your work. Look after yourselves and stay safe on the battlefield.